in Yellen's case, as the former chair of the Federal Reserve, she knows that China plays a very important role in the global financial system, that China's generally positive relationship with the U.S. dollar is instrumental in the dollar remaining the supranational currency. And of course, China is someone who benefits from trade in dollars as the largest trading partner of most countries in the world, and indeed as the largest trading partner of the United States, where dollars are transacted in those deals as well. So I think that, there's this, Yellen is being used to try to keep the relationship on the whole from spiraling out of control, but at the same time, to some extent, masking the fact, although I don't think Beijing is deceived, masking the fact that the U.S. is still very much committed to a downward trend in relations. So I do think she came here to promote this propaganda of overcapacity, contrary to empirical studies. I was on Bloomberg television this morning. Bloomberg has studied the overcapacity issue. Their intelligence unit has done this, and Bloomberg can't see where there's an overcapacity problem in the industries that the United States is concerned about. There was a joke made that maybe China does have an overcapacity problem in terms of making bobblehead dolls or other cheap products that it no longer wants to build its economy on. Nevertheless, in these areas where China is at the cutting edge, very, very competitive, there's not an overcapacity issue. In an election year where Biden is likely will need to win a critical mass of at least 6 states that will probably decide the election, including Michigan, which is the home of the legacy automobile industry, which if we, as an American who grew up in America and who was aware of what was going on in America in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, those industries were doing everything they could to kill EVs, to kill the development of green technology. And they were working often in tandem with the coal industry and the oil industry to, as a trifecta of fossil fuels. And so this is where we are now. Biden needs those votes in Michigan, above all because he's alienated a substantial Muslim population there with his support for Israel's policies in Gaza. And so this has a lot to do with the American failure to compete for several decades. It has a lot to do with what's going on in Israel, as well as China's rise and competition in the EV sector. Well, I think if we understand macroeconomics and monetary policy, we understand that the entire U.S. economy is subsidized by the U.S. manipulation of interest rates and the dollar's bully position in the global market. Why did we have global inflation in recent years? It wasn't because of conflict in Ukraine. It's because the United States expanded the money supply by 20% to cover up its failures to deal with the COVID problem in 2020 and 2021. No other country has the power or the capacity to externalize costs like that. The United States runs a massive trade deficit. It runs a massive budget deficit. And its own industries have hollowed out its manufacturing capacity over the years. Why? Because they wanted to exploit cheap labor overseas. They wanted to take advantage of Chinese workers. And now that China has been able to manage that growth and development in a responsible way, in a way that contributed to the overall development of the nation, this has terrified the U.S. because now the U.S. is finding itself hollowed out. The middle class is frustrated and angry because they've been in decline since the 1980s. And American leaders who are, representing these industries that have effectively destroyed the U.S. Are deciding to wag their finger at China. It's a long-standing story. It's one that's been developing for many years. There's nothing really new here. Yeah, we have to recall that she comes here and she says that that the relationship is better now than it was a year before this time, but she neglects to say that the reason why it was so terrible last year was because there had been all this terrible pressure that the U.S. had continued to bring against China. I think that the trend is still downward. It's just being controlled a little bit better, and we're at less risk for things spiraling out of control, particularly in an election year where American politicians can be a little more reactionary than usual. Of course, the main problem is that a lot of people, certainly a lot of people in China, believe that Trump's chances for winning re-election are very high. And so even if we are able to maintain the stable but still downward trend under Biden, we have no idea what comes next with Trump. He's floated very different ideas, some which seem incredibly destabilizing, and others that would present some interesting alternatives to work with. I think the consensus in China is that that Trump would potentially be more destabilizing, which no one here likes. But long-term, Biden is a greater threat in terms of his capacity to organize strategically effective policies against China. So anyway, that's the larger context. The ones who vote for Trump, most of them ultimately will be those who hate Biden more, and vice versa. Those who vote for Biden will be because they hate Trump more. That's not a really healthy sort of polity. It's certainly not one that will be able to resolve American problems or continuing American crises, including, for example, a story that was just published in Newsweek that a lot of Americans now are skipping meals in order to pay their mortgage. This is what's happening to the American people. This is what's happening to my friends. This is what's happening to the people that I grew up with, and they're sick of it. And I think they all realize that that they're in a hole, and maybe they're convinced that some protection is needed because their industries have been hollowed out so much. But at the same time, increasingly they know that the real problem is with Washington itself, not with Beijing.